And it's a very good afternoon to the Sportsfan Radio panel and also to all our viewers on the Sportsfan Radio YouTube network. Gentlemen, Australian tennis at its highest point since Australia or world power back in the 60s and 70s. Amazing. Coutta, one question for you. Did you see this coming?
Good afternoon. I didn't see the renaissance of Australian tennis coming maybe as quickly as what we have, especially when you're looking at the doubles results, most likely that the four that played last night. But Ash and, of course, Dylan Alcott, we certainly hoped would win the Grand Slam at the Australian Open. Both obviously made the final and one won and one lost. But Dylan certainly lost no admirers. I think that if you look at the numbers, we're probably not still a powerhouse in world tennis, I should say. We've got outliers, and the outliers obviously are Ash Barty, who last evening won the Australian Open in pretty dramatic fashion in the end, you would say. In the men's side of it, we had Alex de Minaur probably go the furthest, and he played Yannick Sinner and fell short in straight sets. So on the men's side of things, we're probably a bit off. But in the women's side, obviously, we've got the number one player in the world for the last 3 years. She's now won 3 Grand Slams, being the French, Wimbledon, and the Australian. The US Open remains. But why could she? And seriously, like, why could she not win the Grand Slam this year? She's playing as good a tennis last night. She was challenged 5-1 down the second. And she came back, won the tiebreaker, and she carried a few people on her shoulders last night. And we've seen before that sometimes as a nation we demand so much, but last evening she was outstanding. So obviously didn't quite see that all of the results coming, but I just think it's just an amazing 2 weeks for Australian tennis. And the challenge now, Professor, and I think I mentioned on one of my tweets, was how does Craig Tyler, his successor, put this into make this a reality going forward for the increase in tennis?
Well, Coutta, we also shouldn't forget the mixed doubles, Forless and Kubler, their first time teaming up together, and they made it through to the final as well.
Yeah, that's right. So Jason and Jamie, young pair. Obviously, Jason's been around the tour a bit, but certainly made the final. Did not disgrace themselves, and again played probably proper doubles. Like, I think that's one of the things out of the Australian Open is that we've seen what they call themselves the special Ks, who probably play a different brand of doubles. And last night they played against Purcell and Ebden that probably play a more traditional style doubles. So, yeah, no, great effort by them to make the final. Last year, obviously, I think Stosur and Ebden won the mixed. Would have been nice to have back-to-back, but for them to make the finals, obviously, it was a terrific effort. And they might go forward as a pair this year.
Gelding?
David, listening to the chair speak after the Barty game that almost went as long as the game itself, there seemed to be a lot of self-congratulations from her to everyone to give this confidence back. Craig Kelly with the Djokovic disaster at the start, the tennis finally took over. I think in the second week, there was still lingering in the first week. Where do you see Craig Kelly's future? And did the Australian Open prove that it was bigger than any tennis player?
I think any tournament's bigger than one tennis player. Like, I think you read some of the articles, and again, like you'd put some faith in them, but the preferential treatment that Djokovic has received over the years as the world number one and a draw card that Tyler thinks is the tournament, I don't think you needed him. And we said that from day one. I think, Judge, you said it as well, is that we do not need Djokovic to be here creating a circus or the tournament focus. Like, we've got the stories out of this tournament will be talked about for years. Like, the way that Sam Stosur handled their retirement was just exceptional. The fact she won a match was terrific. She won some doubles matches and was celebrated as being a great player. But then the other side of Sam has been that she's been an inspiration for the next generation. You hear Casey Dellacqua talk about it. You heard Ash Barty. You heard her competitors. So, again, that's one story. You've obviously got Ash Barty winning her hometown Grand Slam. The world number one actually showing that she's world number one on and off the court rather than being a twat who made it all about himself. And people wonder why the world number one isn't liked. Well, I think he's probably given some pretty good reasons over the last fortnight, plus prior to that, obviously hitting line judges and carry on like that. But you talk about the chairperson of Tennis Australia, Jane Herdlicker or Licker or whatever the surname's pronounced. Her speech was just weird. Like, all you wanted to say was, I think Australia as a nation was just going, get off. Like, we didn't want to hear about, like, there were some stages during her speech where she actually finished and you're thinking, oh, that's well done, Jane, thank you. And then she piped up again. It's like, hang on, like, we don't want to hear from you. We don't want to hear the backslapping. Like, just...
I agree. You've got to congratulate them for a very, very good tournament. But all of Australia, all they wanted to do was hear from Ash Barty. Like,
just know
that was the focus. Dion Gould's onto that. I just thought she kept on going on, and there just seemed to be a lot of this self-justification in that we've done a great job. We'll pat ourselves all on the back. And what we heard in the first week, of course, was these top players, the preferential treatment they get compared to the other players on there just seems to be a bit unbalanced.
It seems to me, Coutta, that we've been, and you were certainly on about Djokovic a couple of months ago about this is a circus on its way, and the circus certainly came. I get the impression that Tiley and Herdlicker are feeling the tom-toms are beating. There's a Liberal Party apparently is, bless their little hearts, are going to have an inquiry into how he got through the process in the first place. I think that's the gift that will keep on giving, knowing the Liberal Party, because they can send some blood in the water. And I suspect that Tiley cannot maintain the conflict of interest he's had for years now, which has really been shown up by this tournament. The tournament runs itself, and it doesn't matter who's running it, unless the sports minister takes it over, in which case we know he'll be stuffed up. You almost can't stuff up the Australian Open. It's such a wonderful tournament. It's our tournament. It's the Oceania tournament. All this talk about it could go to Hong Kong. That is just not going to happen. But I do think Tiley's on his last legs, and Jane, and that's the genesis of that speech last night. I think they feel the pressure, and there's always going to be, you know what governments are like. There's always got to be a sacrificial lamb, so they don't look bad. So I think it's going to be Craig Tiley and probably the board of Tennis Australia.
Yeah, I don't understand how Craig can survive either role that he's got. And if that's the case, then surely you've got the opportunity now to go, right, we need the CEO of Tennis Australia to be the CEO of Tennis Australia and not be the tournament director when you choose to be.
And Coutta, we've talked about this many times. We are, if nothing else in this program, grassroots sport. And I think Craig Tiley sees his role as to run the Australian Open, and tennis can bugger off. I mean, as in country tennis, suburban tennis, where are the boys and girls, but where are the new stars coming from? How's suburban tennis going? I just don't think he sees that as anywhere near his role because of this conflict that he has. And I think tennis, despite these self-serving surveys that put out every few years saying it's the most popular sport in Australia, which is nonsense. I actually think tennis needs a real razz, which can only be given by a whole new board and a whole new approach. I just see somebody else coming, to be honest.
The thing out of all this is that it's going to be a successful tournament despite itself. So the carry on with Djokovic took away from, as Gelding said, really the first week of the tournament. That the carry on, the court cases, the hotel stay outs, the protests, everything like that took away from the start of the tournament and what should have been the focus on court, and in particular, Ash Barty. Like that should have been our focus from day one, was around Ash and around Dylan Alcott. We cannot talk highly enough, and we've done it for years on this show, about the impact that Dylan Alcott has had on tennis. Ignore the handicapped tennis or the disabled tennis, my apologies, that he plays. There is no doubt that what he's done for tennis in Australia is he leaves a significant legacy. Plus what he's done for wheelchair tennis through the whole entire world. His opponents, whether they're like Andy Murray messaging him, this has been a huge, and yet here we were focused on so many different things because our leaders thought that they could do stuff that everyone else knew they shouldn't be doing.
With that, Coutta, though, and Dylan Alcott and what his legacy will be, 10 years ago we wouldn't have seen wheelchair tennis. It would have been on a bloody shoved around the back, or, it wouldn't have been on mainstream TV. He's now made it an event within itself that it is on an equal, the wheelchair tennis, to the men's and the women's and the doubles and the mixed doubles and things like that. So, you can't speak highly enough of him, and getting Australia of the Year in that second week of the tournament just raised at another level. Like, you've got Barty being fantastic. Then you get the story of the men's in the doubles, and then you've got Dylan. So that raised the bar in the second weeks and took away from all the fiasco of the third week. And I found it quite funny. Craig Tilley not coming out of his bunker till day 3 to present to Sam Sober, So they just must be feeling the pressure.
And the other thing, obviously, with Dylan was that it didn't end with the fairy tale, unfortunately, for Dylan, with the singles victory. But he must have been absolutely exhausted from flying up to Canberra, doing the presentation. He would have had some beers. Like, Dylan,
he's had a big week. And commentating as well. But he's not playing, he's commentating.
And I hope that everyone got to see last night that Dylan was actually underneath when Ash went down with the trophy for the first time, and she had her entourage with her, that the family members and friends, and we were fortunate enough to see one of our friends down there, Sally, which was nice. But Dylan was down there and got a big hug off Ash, and I think that just embodies tennis in Australia at the moment, is that there's a great connection no matter what all the other rubbish going on around them. So the challenge for Australia now is to get those girls playing tennis, to get the boys playing, to give them the opportunity to go, right, you may never be number one in the world like Ash, but what we want to see you play from the age of 5 with your hot shots through junior tennis Saturday morning, and then we want to see you progress through to seniors, because senior tennis on a Saturday afternoon is dying. And when I say it's dying, the numbers of teams playing mixed double competition is not what it used to be. It's not that natural progression from juniors through to seniors. Now, Craig and as I said, his successor, because there's no doubt there will be, they need to work with the states to address this issue so that we have better participation levels at the lower end. So grassroots tennis is thriving again, which I don't believe it is.
Again on that, David, though, but isn't that, as we've said, as John rightly points out here, we talk about the AFL, Cricket Australia. We talk about tennis, Tennis Australia. They just worry about their big events and the main things and make sure they get there. They don't, suburban or the roots of all these sporting organisations, really, do they care? Like, as you said, should he be chairman of Tennis Australia when his job's basically, I'll look after the Australian Open. I'll be the director of the Australian Open.
Gelding, I'd hate to see at the moment where Barellan tennis, Rockhampton tennis and Albury tennis is. Well, that's where Goolagong came from. That's where Labor came from. That's where Margaret Court came from. They didn't come from Kooyong or Toorak. That's where Australia's grassroots champions have all come from. And Tennis Australia would not reach and would not be interested in reaching to those places now, because they are absolutely focused on the Australian Open. Coutta, can I just say one thing which is very politically incorrect, but I don't give a stuff about political correctness. Handicapped versus disabled. Can I just say I'm with handicapped, and I'll tell you why. A handicapped horse is a horse that's slowed down. He's got some lead chucked in its saddle and it's slowed down. And I think that's what a handicapped athlete is. They got something which slows them down. Disabled, if something's disabled, it doesn't work. A disabled horse would be a horse that had been shot. And so I think language means everything. Disabled means the opposite of being able. And if you can tell me that Dylan Alcott is disabled, well, I disagree with you entirely, but I think he's handicapped. I think he's slowed down, and that's the word I'd actually prefer, because as much as you can say it's semantics, I actually think language is very important. So I know it's politically incorrect, but I don't care. I want to go back to handicapped. Anyway, enough of my little rant there, Professor.
But I think we're very lucky to have ambassadors like him, Ash. What we saw overnight with the special case, Kyrgios and Kokkinakis. There's a Netflix series coming. We all know it. What an amazing start for the Netflix series that they've had with Djokovic for starters, a successful tournament, the special case going through it, packed crowds for doubles, which is unheard of. Kyrgios aggravating opponents, threatening to fights in change rooms, on court. I thought him and Michael Venus the other night were going to come to blows on the court. There is this sort of line. I think maybe he's crossed a couple of times. I think the crowd's been part of the reason. And I don't want it to get to the stage where, Davis Cup is Davis Cup, but some of the rubbish that was happening during points, like clapping between faults and cheering out, and this stupid Sue chant, like that's nearly challenging Aussie as being the dumbest chant in Australian sport. Like, we're better than that. I reckon we're better than that. So I think at times, the crowd's probably crossed the line. I think Kia Arena, again, selling out to sponsors. But I thought it was great for the sport, certain parts of it. The best part of all, though, Gelding and Judge and Professor, has been the tennis that they've actually played has been off the charts. Like the doubles play of Kyrgios and Kokkinakis, like, I don't understand, and this will be a question down the track, is that if you had Kyrgios playing doubles with John Peers in Davis Cup, they would not lose. They would not lose. That serve that Kyrgios has got is amazing. It's best of 3 sets, so why would you not be playing him? Like,
Coutta, he's got to want to play Coutta, doesn't he?
Yeah, that's right. Could Kyrgios play without atmosphere? I mean, if he's playing overseas, where people actually don't like him, which I suspect is most of overseas, I just wonder whether because he brings out his best in Australia with the crowds and Kia Arenas, all the lunatics, but I just wonder whether week after week, he can produce on an ongoing basis.
No, I think so. To answer your question there, yes, he can, and we've seen it with places where the crowds are a little bit vocal and a bit raucous, is that he gets into it. Like, as I said before, this bloke will make money through his appearance fees and appearance money. Like, you've got such polar differences between him and Ash. And like Darren Carl said, we know Nick doesn't want to train. We know he loves the atmosphere, playing in front of a good crowd and a vocal crowd and getting them into the match. Now, if you look back on some of Kyrgios's wins, the crowd in Mexico that he won at, they went troppo because he encouraged it. He wanted it. So Davis Cup's the same. If the crowd's against him, could you imagine it? He would love it. So but as Gelding said, he's got to want to play Davis Cup. Now, whether there is a conflict with Leighton, who's we've talked about previously on the show, I don't know. But for Australian tennis, we need to be having players like Nick Kyrgios wanting to represent the green and gold, and Kokkinakis being fit, representing the green and gold as well. Because if they do, and they buy into that team atmosphere of previous years where you go through them, you've got your Pat Cashers of the world, you've got all these players that have lifted when they've played Davis Cup for Australia.
Rafter.
Ash.
Ewart himself.
Yep.
They've all been fantastic Australian Davis Cup players, apart from being, champions in the single games themselves. Those three that you mentioned have just concentrated on Davis Cup and made it a focus. And as they said, they love being part of a team.
And that's been shown. I think that's been shown, Gelding, is that the doubles, you look at the doubles and the way they've played together, it's that they've loved that team environment. Now, that's Davis Cup all over. So if there's an issue with Hewitt, surely it's time we address it.
Coutta, can I just ask, because we get taken away by Kyrgios, and just interesting, some of the commentators saying this is the new future of tennis is Kia Arena. It's we've been through this before. Yeah. I urge the viewers to look at the 1991 US Open, Jimmy Connors, who had almost was out of the game, came back. You want to talk about a lunatic getting a crowd going. Just watch that match. We've seen this before. What happened after that? There weren't more Jimmy Connors. There was Ivan Lendl and Stefan Edberg. So we're back to the most boring era. So, and I suspect that's going to happen. The question, though, Coutta, is how good is Kokkinakis? Because he seems to be sort of fallen under the as a sub-headline of Kyrgios. But my impression is he's a bloody good player.
Oh, absolutely. I think we spoke about him the other week with Roddy on the show. Was it Nick? Nick, obviously, and him have played a lot of tennis together. Kokkinakis, the injuries that he's had have just been horrific. And I think that's the story out of this, is that he's kept fighting, he's kept going, probably been opportunities to say, do you know what, this is all too bloody hard. But when you see him win Adelaide, you see him destroy players with the big serve and the big forehand. You think there's a future for him. And then the other thing is he actually can volley too. So
absolutely.
Let's see how he goes. Let's keep the body fit. I don't think you'd want to play him on grass, to be honest. So he might be a smoky for Wimbledon. And imagine if Kyrgios and Kokkinakis do pair up for the Grand Slams this year. The French Open, well, they might have a crack at the French Open and upset some people in the crowd over there. But if you go to Wimbledon and play on the grass, they're a chance to hold serve nearly every time.
Could though, can they both play doubles? If they're really serious about their singles game, and both Kyrgios and Kokkinakis could go deep in singles, would they actually be playing doubles?
Yeah, they'll play doubles. Absolutely, no doubt whatsoever. They'll continue to play doubles because they enjoy playing doubles together and the company. So
I was just going to say that to John and ask Coutta his advice. Like Ash Barty plays a lot of doubles and has previously and things like that. Will them playing doubles help their singles game? It seems that, together they have a lot of, they have fun and or banter or will that help them relax a bit in their singles, do you think?
I think the other thing going that we're probably overlooking a little bit with Kyrgios is he pushed Medvedev. Round two, second round, we had Kyrgios playing Medvedev on on what is it?
Rod Laver.
John Cain Arena, sorry. And that night, yep, Kyrgios carried on a bit, but it was amazing tennis to watch. Now, Nick can't sustain that for a whole tournament. We know that, and we've just got to live with that. And he doesn't want to live. He doesn't want to go deep into the tournaments if it means more ice bars and all that sort of stuff. But if you can play doubles with Kokkinakis, it's the best of three. I can't see why he won't and why they won't play doubles together. So will it help them play singles? It might, but at the end of the day, it might help them with their fitness, especially Kokkinakis, hopefully, with his fitness-based Gelding. So
could they become the Woodies?
Well, I'm not sure they'll become the Woodies, but they definitely play a different style of doubles, and it's pretty brute power at times. Like Kyrgios last night, I think, tried to put a ball straight through Max Purcell, and
he hit it pretty hard, didn't he?
Max is still with us today, which is a positive.
Yeah. He did go back about 5 or 6 feet when he hit it at him.
He did. I think he knew exactly where it was going. So,
yeah.
But no, I think it's been good. I think Judge is right. How do you, like people saying this is the new tennis and this is gonna drive tennis? I don't see how. Are these kids that are watching it all of a sudden going to find their local tennis club and go, oh, I want to play tennis and I want to play like Kyrgios and Kokkinakis do? So I just don't know how they transfer the interest at the moment in tennis, which is high considering the ratings last night were absolutely the highest women's final of all time. There's other stats around it. How do they convert that into getting people to play tennis? That's the most important thing.
Coutta, my last question, a technical question. I think the most ridiculous thing in sport is when the doubles players talk into their wrists, like Secret Service guys have this little private discussion, and then the guy who's on the net gives a hand signal as to where the serve is to go. Why didn't he tell him where the serve is to go when he's talking into his wrist 10 seconds earlier?
I think that this has been quite well publicised, Judge, and I know you're all over social media, so
love it. I just watch nothing else, to be honest.
So people have raised the same thing: is that why when they go back they talk into their wristwatch?
Dick Tracy.
Maybe they've got Stefanos. What's his name?
That's his old man.
Yeah, his old man's on the phone, but it might be like a bat phone. But then they go to the net, and as you said, they do their signals about where they're going to serve, what the net player's going to do, etc., etc. So again,
or is it being they're watching too much beach volleyball?
I also think if it's Kyrgios and Kokkinakis, they've probably seen someone in the grandstands and they just wanted to point that out. So,
and the next thing they do after a double fault, they go and fist pump each other. What the hell is so good about doing a double fault and a fist pump each other?
I've never understood the reason behind going back, but I think it's about being positive and maintaining that positivity. It's not quite the old days where you serve a double and you sort of just go about the next one. You sort of have to engage with your partner and say, well, I just missed that second serve, whatever it is. So no, I think what they've done is great, but it's a matter of now going, right, how do we use that as a nation or a tennis body to get kids playing tennis and get them, first of all, into Hot Shots, which is an amazing program, and then progress through the age groups and enjoy tennis and see that it is a great sport.
Peter, a couple of questions for you. One that the judge raised with me earlier. This tactic of the server's partner straddling the centre line of the court and ducking down.
Yep.
I must admit, when I was playing tennis as a young kid, playing doubles tennis and watching doubles tennis, never saw any of that. Haven't picked it up recently. What is that all about?
Yeah, so it's the only formation that was a bit odd back in the day was tandem. So you would stand. So if your opponent's sort of making every return cross court, what you try and do to break up the routine or to make them try something different would be tandem. So we use it still now and again. I can assure you, we certainly didn't play the I formation. I'd be bending down and I wouldn't be able to get up. So I'd do myself. In the terms of I'd do myself a mischief. But I'm not sure anyone would see the Jared McCracken behind as well. But the I formation is done so that really you've got the ability to go either way, depending on your signal. So you can go left or right. So yeah, it's I don't know who
as you said, Coutta, you've got to have a lot of faith in the person serving if you're in that I formation.
Well, Gelding, you raise a point there that yesterday in the mixed doubles, 2 days ago in the mixed doubles, they actually analysed the standing of the partner at the net. So some crouch down, some lean with their left foot forward.
Getting the running position.
Yeah, and they actually analysed it, started showing it, and I'm thinking, I'd just be wearing a bloody stack hat, I reckon, at times. Like the blokes.
I'd be wearing a cricket protector but putting it up the other way, in the other position, down the back of your pants.
But no, it's changed, Dennis, and I think, Professor, at the end of the day, all it is about is it's about, one, the server putting the ball where they communicate, and then obviously then creating the net player to be able to either cross or stay where they are. Doubles is still a net game. Kyrgios and Kokkinakis probably a little bit different, but I think at the end of the day, if you can get the serve in the right place, you're probably going to be able to put most balls away.
Cool. Let me just say that I think it's naff. I think it's stupid, and I've had a good look at it last night. I thought for the first time I'm going to have to look at this tactic. I actually don't think overall it works, and I'm happy to spend a bit of time discussing it. But we should get a biomechanic expert, professor, as we talked about before, to analyse it. But for no other reason, you're behind the 8 ball by doing that crouch, having to get up, having to then make a decision left or right, whatever. And I just think, plus they know what you're doing. It's not that it's a big. Oh gee, look at this manoeuvre. Everybody's doing it, and I think you'll find very soon it'll lose currency. We'll see. I think it's stupid.
I'd probably disagree on that, John. But we're looking from afar, of course, and if the best players in the world are doing it, so I can probably mention Bob and Mike Bryan. They were big fans of it. So I think it probably works. The best part is that the net player is probably straddling the net, so it's not as though they have any issues getting the ball over the net. So we'll see what happens with it. But I think men's doubles and doubles in general has been put on the spotlight, and I think it's only a positive for tennis. But as I said, how do we get that to translate into numbers playing? And Tylee and Jane and the board and whatever can dictate numbers, but until they actually dig a bit deeper, I think that that's all fluff.
Another one, Coutta, Dylan Alcott's performance to actually make the final of his part of the tournament. Which other star tennis player would have interrupted their lead up to a Grand Slam final by going interstate, accepting an award? But when I think about it, most of the stars would have been a no-show. They would have said, well, yeah, thanks very much for that, but I'm sorry, I'm playing in this very important tennis tournament. I can't lose focus by doing something like that. What are your thoughts on that? Because I thought, that was a pretty selfless act, really.
Well, I think Professor what does, it comes back to his mandate. Is that he's not here for tennis. He happens to be pretty good at tennis, but I think it comes back to his greater goal, and that the impact that he wants to have on whether it's Victoria, whether it's Australia or the world, and his community. He is selfless. People will say he's in your face a bit too much with all the adverts and things like that, but who cares? Like, at the end of the day, he's championing a cause that he believes in, that to date probably hasn't received the recognition that deserves. And for him, he saw this as greater good at the end of the day. So, yeah, it may have impacted his ability to win a tournament, but at the end of the day, he knows what he wants to do going forward. And I think he would say it was probably a small price to pay for the greater good going forward, Professor.
All right, Coutta, one big match to go. The men's singles tonight, Nadal v Medvedev. Were you expecting that pairing all along?
I would say once Djokovic was deported on the slow boat back home, that Medvedev was probably going to make it. Whether Nadal was the opponent, I'm not sure. I think what we've seen over the last week is that, and Judge, we've talked about on the show before, the transition from the big three, big four, being your Djokovic, your Nadal, your Andy Murray and your Roger Federer. And we're starting to see that happen more. So out of the tournament, Professor, we can take away performances like Felix, I can't pronounce his surname, but the young kid from Canada, Shapovalov from Canada as well. Yeah, Garmon Fields, who played a great tournament. Berrettini, who we've adopted as Australian because he goes out with an Aussie, put in a terrific performance against Medvedev and maybe could have gone further. So the transition, I think, starting to happen, but Nadal is just an absolute warrior. Like, honestly, this bloke, as I was saying, 4 to 5 months ago, he was on crutches with foot issues. He's come out, played some long matches in the tournament, got through, and he's made the final. And honestly, like, he could, if he wins the Australian Open, he goes to 21 Grand Slams. He's got the French Open coming up, which is like home to him. He could get to 22, and that makes him 2 ahead of Federer, who I don't think Roger probably wins another one. I think his career is probably a talking point to go forward with. And Djokovic, who, the French Open, you've got to be vaccinated. So not sure Novak is. I don't know if he is vaccinated. I'm not sure yet. But and then I assume that London would be the same. So let's see what happens. Tonight, I think you're probably going to get Medvedev in 4. He'll probably rile the crowd up a little bit. They'll all be going for Nadal, but at the end of the day, I think Medvedev probably in 4 sets.
You talked about riled up. His outburst against the chair umpire, $17,000 enough? I would have thought it deserved more, maybe even a suspension.
One of the things that continues to amaze is the suspensions that are invoked on players for breaking rackets, for criticism. I think it was Shapovalov who criticised the umpire the other day and said they're all corrupt. Now, I think he only got fined $8,000 for that. Now, when you use the terms corrupt, that's pretty serious, isn't it?
Yep. Shapovalov ought to have been kicked out of the tournament. And in fact, I'd suspend him for a year. He has said, and he's a top 10 player, that all umpires in this game are corrupt. That which means they are dishonest and they cheat. Now, I can't think of anything. Forget disrespectful. It was straight out defamatory, and it was against all umpires. And Medvedev last night, Professor, I remember John McEnroe being kicked out of a tournament, so it's in fact Australian Open. I think for doing less than what Medvedev did, and quite apart from anything else, they are humiliating the central umpire because he's just screaming at him. Are you an idiot? Listen to me. Look at me when I talk to you. He's not talking to him. He's screaming at him. And I for one, would have kicked both of those guys out of the tournament.
Shouldn't the referee, like, they can award points against them and things like that, just giving him things like that and let him explode even more so he eventually, loses the game, because it's obviously a way that they use to psych themselves up. Like, he's a boring tennis player, fantastic tennis player, but awfully boring. And that's the only way to get any kind of interest. And it seems to be he explodes like that when he's in a little bit of trouble, and it seems to help psych himself up. Surely there's other sanctions apart from fines later. What about penalties and taking games off them during that would just really, really affect the result?
At the very
Because the fines won't work on the amount of money they're earning. Like, last night, 2.4 million and 1.6 million. Like, you could yell as much as you want and take as many $8,000 fines as you could.
Judge and Gelding, here's one for you, is that during a match, you can take 25 seconds to have your first serve. If you don't do it within the 25 seconds, or maybe a little bit longer, you get a warning. If you do it again, you lose your first serve, right?
Yeah.
Straight to a second serve. If you do it again, I think it's a code violation, but whatever happens, right, that is a huge penalty compared to copping a $7,000 fine afterwards. So I think there's something merit to that. Like, I don't even know if Shapovalov got a code violation for what he said. And
the umpire just stood there and took it because these players are collie felt. They're just, they're only letting out their frustrations and that. Imagine if he had taken a game off him.
Oh, exactly, Geldy. If the very first time Medvedev screamed or Shapovalov said something like he said, okay, Dimitri, you've just lost a game.
Yeah.
You're kidding. This is outrageous. You just lost 2 games. Do you want to keep doing this with me? And then it'll stop. It'll stop pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to get a $12,000 fine.
And it'll stop the next guy doing it too.
It's nonsense.
And can we then compare that to Ash Barty? Like last night. So last night, the girl she was playing, Collins, had approached the chair umpire 3 times and the like. Now, when they're serving, it's the receiver has to abide by the server pace. So if Ash is quick during points, then the receiver has to be the same. So last night, Ash was waiting a couple of times for Collins. Ash just gave the little look across to the central umpire, just gave it a look, just to indicate that what's happening here. Like her, and if we say one last thing today, Professor, is that Ash Barty's everything that you want in a human being. She's pretty talented when it comes to sport, so she can play tennis, cricket. You see her warm up with cricket, and then she's probably a scratch golfer going forward as well. So potentially might play golf later on in her career. Who knows? But she's just this wonderful human. And if there was a moment that summed up Ash Barty last night, it was when she heard the words Yvonne Goolagong will come out and present the trophy. Like, if you get to see the video again, just watch Ash's face. And the smile on her was just amazing. So let's focus on really good things. The way she conducted herself from day one. Back in Adelaide, she played Adelaide week 1. She didn't play the second week. She's won the Australian Open. She will do as much media as she can. Last night, she had a beer on TV and she proved once again she is human. But she's absolutely everything that as a nation we thrive for and that we love. So everyone will feel today that they know Ash Barty, that we've all had a win. And after a pretty shitty 2 years, I think we've got someone that really does bring us all together, and we can celebrate what's great about being Australian.
Well, and isn't it great that we're talking about the tennis and on the court, not in the courts. And so we hope that there's more of that and less of litigation or people trying to get into the country when they shouldn't.
Yep, absolutely. And like, let's go back 2 years or whatever it was when her coach, Craig Tyser, could not get into Queensland because he did not wear football boots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, she talked about him last night, and you listen to her talk about Craig, and you can understand why they've got this amazing relationship. We talked about at the time, how could Craig Tyser not get into Queensland or vice versa because he couldn't get an exemption or whatever it was. We've got the world number one Grand Slam winner and she's not part of the AFL. Like, it's just, again.
Well, probably our best sports person currently, and at the time, she would be rated as Australia's best sports person. So way above the AFL. You're talking about an international number one.
But just got on with the business. Didn't complain. Didn't go any further with it. We can't get in. Let's just move forward. So you talk about best sportswomen or best athletes and best sports people in Australia. It's amazing at the moment that the women are holding us up.
Well, that's a great segue, Coutta, because the judge has got a bee in his bonnet about women's cricket, and that is calling the Australia versus England series the Ashes. Judge, would you like to expand upon that, please?
Yeah, I'm long, as you know, supported women's sport in all its forms, and one thing that annoys me that women's is demeaned, and by appropriating the word Ashes and giving this fake connection between the women's game to the men's game, I think doesn't do the women's game any favours. It is not an Ashes series. It's a 4-day test, bookended by 3 one-days and 3 T20s. And I just think it's demeaning to the women's game by calling it an Ashes series. The women don't want test matches. It doesn't suit. There's been very few, about 1/50th of the tests of the men. It's insignificant. It's not played by many countries, and so that to me is demeaning. The other thing that's demeaning is they bring the bloody rope in by about 20 metres, and I'm not good at my maths, but I would think that would reduce the area of the oval by something like 20%. And I'm just not in favour of it just being an obvious representation. Women aren't as good as men. Like hell, some of those women can smash the ball out of the stands. And I just think it looks really demeaning and poor to have the rope brought in.
So let's look at two things there, Judge. First of all, I want to look at the Ashes, and then we'll look at adjusting women's or sporting codes, adjusting women's sections of their sport. I looked up the Ashes. The Ashes is defined as a test cricket series between Australia and England. I looked up series. Series is a number of events. So it can't be the Ashes because they're not playing a series of test matches.
No.
Well, they're not playing for the Ashes.
That's right. They're not playing for the
Ashes
Ashes either.
They're not playing for the Ashes. They're playing one test, and they're playing one test over 4 days. Now, every Ashes series I've seen has been 5 tests over 5 days each test.
And Gelding, can I just suggest this, and you'll say this is sexist, but again, I don't care. I don't think if they televised a 4 or 5 days series of women's tests that they get the TV audience. I just can't see it happening.
Just on that, John, England just got another wicket. So Australia's 5 for 130 with a lead of 170, and there's just over a session left. So
70
it's going to be a draw.
70 overs, Gelding. I just read down the bottom of the screen left today.
Yeah.
Because they've lost. And this will go to Judge. It's a 4-day test. So yesterday they lost half a day. Was it half a day? Oh, sorry, a last session and a half to rain in Canberra. So
basically a 3.5-day test.
And by the way, of the 50 tests between England and Australia, so-called tests, 29 have been draws, 58%. And that's probably because they're 4-day matches and they just don't. And by the way, a bit of trivia, Professor, there's almost no chance that the urn has got ashes in it. You know, the burning of the stump and the putting in the ashes. I wish they just take the bale, sorry. Wish they just take the bloody lid off and have a look at it, because apparently there's almost zero chance of these
Well, it never really
ashes in there.
It very rarely leaves Lords, doesn't it?
Never leaves Lords. No.
Even though the burning of the bales were in Sunbury, I think, is the original birthplace of them. But, yeah, they very rarely leave Lords. So, yeah, it's probably stuck to the bottom of the bloody trophy cabinet there.
Gelding, can we talk about the Ashes, though, the cricket that's being played?
The men's or the women's?
No, let's talk the women's, because it's on at the moment. And I think the professor's sort of had his little gripe on a text message around its scheduling and everything like that. But we have got some amazing cricketers playing in this match now. The English obviously are going through a bit of a transition with some of their players, but they've still got some superstars. And Heather Knight in the first innings, the first innings and what she made. And now you've got Brunt taking wickets, just dismissed one of our best players, Meg Lanning. She took 5 for in the first. It is great cricket to watch. And really, it should be getting the publicity that the men get. They're more successful, or they have been more successful than our men. And they're good people too. They're probably people you'd have a beer with, rather than the carry-on you saw once we won the other day, the pub, all the videos of them at the pub singing "We Are the Champions," and Nathan Lyon referred to as the GOAT all the time. Like,
Gary.
I just get a bit sick of the Australian carry-on about the men, rather than, like, you look at our women and you look at Elise Perry, who's an absolute superstar. You go through Beth Mooney, came back from a broken jaw in the warm-up. Ash Gardner just won the Cricketer of the Year. Like, did you know that the AB medal was done and run, Judge?
Yep.
Yeah, the other day, yeah.
Judge, were you aware of that?
I'm aware of it, but you're saying that there wasn't much publicity to it?
There was none, was there? Just an award ceremony done at the mansion at Rupertswood, the home of the Ashes, I think.
But isn't this just prove what we've been saying for years, that women do sport better than men? If you want to look for role models, just look to the women's game every day of the week. I just get sick of women's sport being a subset of the men's, and that's where I see these Ashes. I think it's being a subset, and I think women should do it their way and do it differently.
Well, okay, Judge. Go on, Gelding.
I was just going to say, I think cricket does it a bit better than the AFL does women's football. Gives it a bit of respect. No one does it better than women's netball, and women's golf probably is the next thing. But I'm on kind of John's point and also Professor's point. This different set of rules during the sports, like, bringing the ground in, as John said, the women can hit the ball as well as men. And if that's there, that's about field placings, and that's a skill of the captain then. You've got to figure out where to place a field to a certain batsman. Golf, now they have drivers, and that women can hit them as far as men. So why are we off, separate marks? Why do we say, we'll bring the ground in because they haven't got the same power? It's a load of crap. The bats are still the same kind of double width now, and it's all about timing in cricket. I don't know. Tennis is good because they're the same, but then again, I still have that problem. Why not make men's 3 sets, like, and make women's and men's and doubles?
Because Couta's going to get angry, that's why.
5. Hey?
Couta's going to get angry.
I just like it for the grand
different rules. There's men's rules and there's women's rules, and they try to, come out with all the thing. Well, Jesus, just make the games the same. Make a test 5 days, because if you lose half a day with rain, you might get a result. Make women's tennis 5 sets or men's tennis 3 sets. Bring the golf things back. Leave the boundaries the same as any ground because it's natural. Because you get a ground over in India or England that's 30 yards from the pitch, and you can miss hit sixes, well, that's a ground. Yeah, you don't have to bring the MCG boundary in 50 yards, so.
Did you watch the, sorry, Professor, I've watched a bit of sport this weekend because really it's, we're still a little bit wary of what we're doing. So the Ashes has been on most days, and the cricket, the bowling, the fielding, the growth in it, Gelding has been terrific. The actual outswing, like they're just terrific to watch.
Yeah, that's craft, and they're as good as craft as the men. In fact, probably concentrate more on technique than the men. But anyway, look, it's only my opinion. It should be the same all over. And this one test, and then you go into a 50-over game on Thursday, ridiculous. As John would say, this is a token test, isn't it?
Yeah. So they can try and call it the Ashes.
Yeah. Which they don't play for.
Judge, just on what we were talking about bringing the ropes in for the grounds, if we extrapolate that, then women should play on shorter soccer grounds. They should be given allowances in racing, horse racing I'm talking about. Doesn't it make a nonsense of women playing on full-size soccer grounds, no extra allowance for a woman who's riding a racehorse? Surely we should be striving for equality. Now, let's face it, the only reason that it's 5 sets and 3 sets in men and women in tennis is because that's just a traditional thing. It could be changed in the blink of an eye. It doesn't remain like that because people don't believe that women couldn't play 5 sets anymore. That was what it was all about to start with. They couldn't play the extra period of time. Now, all that's gone. We had the example last week of the Australian Baseball League pitching against men, Genevieve Beacom. There's no allowance made for her. Why do people who are running these sports seem to believe that women need some assistance, which it does?
It's because, Professor, as I said before, the world's run by idiots and so is sport. That lie, that canard has been absolutely upset when women were allowed to run a marathon. For years, women were not allowed to run in the marathon. There was no 1,500. There was the 800 for the women. It was just a bit, because they're a bit softer, a bit gentler, like hell. They took this decision about 40 years ago now for women to allow to run the marathon. Well, guess what? They're running the marathons perfectly well, thank you. What's interesting, and we've talked this before, there's generally a 10% strength differential between men and women. And my argument is that 10% is actually decreasing. It's not increasing. So eventually we will get to a stage where in strength games, such as golf, that women's tee, I think, will disappear because eventually women will get to the stage of actually literally hitting it as far as the men do. But every other sport, there is no reason why there should be a differential between field sizes, ground dimensions, or the amount of games that they can play in any one sport. It is a historical nonsense.
John, on that, like with golf, with some of these golf clubs and drivers they're making now, women are almost hitting them as long as men. That's not. And I noticed one thing which I noticed with interest last night was Ash Barty during the tournament before the final had spent something like 6.5 hours on court. And I think Medvedev and Nadal were up to about 15 hours on court, just with going into 4 sets and 5 sets and things like that. So that's where I think tennis is one of the ones, even though it's the same court, that seems to be the big difference, is that there's nothing. And Ash Barty's is as fit as anyone. as Medvedev or that. So, I can see no difference. And everything seems to be going 3 sets these days. I think the only 5 setters, and I'll rely on David here, seems to be the big 4 events are the only 5 set games.
And the Davis Cup
play. Is that right, David? Or
correct? Yeah, that's the only 5 sets are the Grand Slams.
So you've got your majors operating under a different set of rules than every other event during the year.
Because that's tradition, Gelding. We love that word, don't we? Tradition. The other part is that when you start comparing men's and women's, and when they're run by idiots and stuff like that, and I know Professor will get to it, is I've watched 4 matches of AFLW this weekend, and I'm assuming that the AFL has got involved with the umpiring and determinations, holding the ball rule between matches has changed. So I've never seen it as bad as what it has been. So the other night, as an instance, Gelding, 18 holding the ball, free kicks were paid in the first half.
Yeah.
18. Now, you can't tell me that they won all there, or they're the same rules as what was then being officiated, say Melbourne, Adelaide, or Brisbane, Geelong last night. So we start talking about it, we're going, right, let's run them as separate sports like we've talked about previously, and just let them go.
Yeah.
AFLW, the other night, GWS played the Bulldogs in Marrickville. Now, it's a shame we haven't got Daligan on, because Marrickville, it's a long way from the Shire, shall we say. But what it highlights is that there's this ground in this football ground in Marrickville that's got stands.
Fanny country.
Yeah, but it's got stands that they're going to use for Sydney's. Sydney is going to use as their home for AFLW. Now, it's a ground that's got stands in. If you look at the GWS's home ground of Blacktown, that's a soulless. But it just goes to say that I think that the AFLW is doing so many things right, connecting with community and grassroots by playing games at Casey, by playing games at Maroochydore. Adelaide has played at Norwood, or the Parade as it's known. What it's showing is that they actually understand who they're aiming at and who they want to get watching them. AFL, I just think they're just this corporate beast that do they care if there's 30,000, 40,000, as long as it's a made-for-TV product?
I thought the AFL were going, in Victoria, was going to use the Footscray, the old Footscray ground, and the Carlton ground as their kind of headquarters. But anyway.
And a lot of people Gelding still find that local footy suffered like crazy over the last two years. Like the inability to be able to go to local footy and watch and have beers and sit on the hill and catch up with mates and stuff like that. Women's footy, AFLW, is actually creating that and getting people to actually get together, have a beer, take the kids along. Like my brother took his 2 kids along to Casey last Saturday afternoon, which I think was about 40 degrees in the gates of hell. And he said, quarter time, the kids went off and they went down the slide or something like that. They went to some various activations, and he said it was just a really, really good day at the footy.
Good. Well, that's what it's supposed to be.
Well,
all right, gentlemen. Gelding, what are your best bets for today's races?
Well, we've only got Donald races, Professor. Surprising, according to the TAB website, Donald had a good 4. Sale is abandoned after they pulled up a heavy 10 there. So, anyway, excuse me. So we'll have 3 at Donald, Professor. Race 1, number 1, Beyondtastic. Matty Elledon's from Flemington's taking one up to Donald, so that's got to be a good sign in the maiden. We'll then go race 3, number 7, the Dodgy One. You know, could name a lot of people that one. Ma Eustace, Harry Coffey on board, Donald obviously coming from their Ballarat base. And we'll go race 7, number 3, Volatile, another Ma Eustace horse with Linda Meacham, Professor, in race 7, number 3. So they're the 3 for today, Professor.
All right,
Hopefully
thanks.
to use some of those bonus bets from the places we had yesterday.
Yes, Gelding, thanks very much for that. And gentlemen, before we go, Coutta, I couldn't leave this edition of Sports Fan without saying I copied you into a tweet yesterday, a rather exciting tweet of a young Melbourne player showing some desperation in a practice match.
Yes, Professor. The glory days of Melbourne, where we had practice match or intra-club matches, I should say, where we got excited when Shannon Burns kicked 5 goals playing on Tom Gillies and thought that our time had come in the sun. The other day, we saw some highlights from the practice match of young Cozzy Pickett, who gets bums on seats, chased down another speedster in Jaden Hunt. So people talk about practice as you play. We're premiers, Professor, so we're the hunted now. Last year we won 17 during the season, and we haven't lost for a while. We haven't lost for a while, Professor, and that's why his loss against Adelaide certainly hurt yesterday. I was a bit disappointed that we lost, but just know the fact that we got bullied around by an Adelaide team that was a lot more physical.
Gelding, quickly before we go.
Very quick one, Professor. One for the judge. I noticed, Professor, you sent around a photo of the leadership team for the Saints. Just
Yes.
want a quick view of the judge on where he sees St Kilda this year. Will we be able to chase down the premiers in Melbourne?
Yeah, okay.
David seems to have already got it wound up again for him.
I don't think so, Gelding, but look, you know, no, I don't think so. I'd like to mount a case that I can't at the moment. But this is going to be a big, horrible year between you two and Melbourne. If they keep going like I think they're going to go, this is going to be a very unpleasant year for me and I suspect the Gelding. But anyway, bring it on.
Just on that, Professor, Melbourne's training at Casey during the off-season because we actually don't have a home practice ground at Gosh's Paddock. That's how well we're going at the moment.
Yeah, well, they're redoing the ground.
That's right. Nothing. This is what happens when you're premiers. We're getting a grand ground.
It started already. It started already. I can't handle it.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks very much for your contributions today. People who are watching, what we'd ask is that you like our station on YouTube, that you subscribe to the channel, and that you forward it so that your mates can see what we're talking about. And until next Sunday afternoon, it's a very good afternoon.